Welcome to A Time for Change. I'm Kristin Myers here with Alexis Christoforous and Sibile Marcellus. Now, today is what is known as Equal Pay Day for Black women. That's the day when Black women will finally catch up to what white men earned in the previous year. Now, let that sink in for just a minute. It takes an additional 7 months for the average Black woman to earn what a white man made in just 12.
Yeah, and if that doesn't catch your attention, we're going to put it another way. Black women who work full-time and year-round are typically paid just 63 cents for every dollar paid to white men.
So what can be done to close that gap and help level the playing field for Black women? Earlier this year, Goldman Sachs announced that it was investing $10 billion over the next 10 years in Black women. The first round of capital investments and grants is already being rolled out. Joining us now is Margaret Andadu, Global Head of Sustainability and Impact for Goldman Sachs Asset Management. Margaret, this initiative is called 1 Million Black Women. How will it actually impact the lives of that many women?
Thank you so much for having me. So we are going to have a holistic impact, and I think it starts with what you discussed in the opening. There is a very, very significant gap between what Black women earn in this country and white men. And the reason why that's important, especially for our initiative, is that we framed it with just the enormous wealth gap that exists between Black women and white men. And when you start to peel back that wealth gap, and it stands at an alarming 90%, 2/3 of that, right, a significant portion, can be explained by that wage gap. And I think there are a few things that are really important here from a historical perspective. So if we go back, roughly 40 years, Black women were earning just 56 cents on the dollar relative to white men. And we were actually closing that gap at a pretty fast clip for 10, 20, 30 years after that. And so Black women got up to 71 cents on the dollar, right? We were making progress. What's important for people to understand is we're now moving in the wrong direction. So if you look at 2011, when we got to that highest point of roughly 71 cents on the dollar, we've started to backtrack. The recovery out of our last financial crisis took us in the wrong direction to the number that you mentioned just now at 63 cents on the dollar. And so we need to think about what's driving our economy, what's happening, what are the changes in job creation, education, et cetera, that have now got us moving in the wrong direction. And so as we thought about our initiative, 1 Million Black Women, we really peeled back that data and wanted to understand all of the aspects of what drives that wealth gap and that wage gap. And it's the types of jobs that Black women are concentrated in. It's the neighborhoods that Black women live in and the types of opportunity that's apparent there. It's tied to healthcare, right? Part of the wage gap is just that Black women have a 10 points lower overall labor participation rate. And Black women, when we talk about healthcare, they're 35% more likely to cite healthcare as a barrier to work. So what we really need to do is understand all of the factors that contribute: healthcare, education, housing, access to capital, financial information, and really tackle all of it, because there's no silver bullet. This is a really comprehensive issue.
So to that point, Margaret, this is an incredibly complex, multifactorial problem that's going to require, as you're mentioning, not just one solution, but frankly, the overlap and overlay of many different solutions and also policies. So I'm curious to know, as you are, having this 1 million Black women, essentially, why focusing on this initiative, and instead of perhaps focusing on government policies that might be able to essentially reduce some of those gaps that we're seeing, not just in wealth and pay, but also, as you're mentioning, in healthcare and education, in the labor market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it just can't be one or the other. So even as we talk about the investing approach with 1 million Black women, and again, that's $10 billion over the next decade, in housing interventions, in creating more affordability and access to childcare, in providing more capital to entrepreneurs so they can start those businesses. In each one of those spaces, there's always a public-private partnership of some sort. So if you think about, for example, the work we're doing around access to capital, right? Providing capital to Black women who are starting businesses at the fastest rate of any demographic. And that's really important when we talk about the issues we're trying to tackle here, because equity in a business is one of the clear ways that people really generate not only wealth for themselves, but also create more wages for others. When we do those access to capital programs, we partner heavily with, partners like SBA at the federal level, the state and city level, local, small business development centers. And so it can't be focusing just on private capital investment or just on public policy. These things really need to work in tandem. And so as we think about the initiative we're embarking on, which, we announced back in March, a big piece of it was around listening, right? Black women understand their challenges, they understand the solutions. And so as we've been doing these listening sessions, many of them have been in partner with public sectors. Actually later today, we're having a listening session with 20 mayors across the country to talk about how we can work together to solve some of the housing challenges, which are a part of this. So, it really, to your point, you called it a multifactorial problem. It's not just government, it's not just private capital, it's not just not-for-profits, it's really how we all work together.
And Margaret, you said that it's multifactorial. How about racial bias and gender bias? How does that impact women's earnings?
It has a significant impact. And I think it's almost ironic in that we see that in the data, right? You peel back all the reasons that drive that wage gap. Again, part of it's education status, part of it is the industries, and then you get to what we call the unexplained factors, the things that we can't sort of understand through the data, through the numbers. So we know there's bias. We know there are sectors and industries where Black women with the same titles, with the same role, with the same education level, make lower wages than men. And so that is certainly a part of the issue.
I have to ask, Margaret, just because, this labor market right now is becoming increasingly tight. We're hearing of labor shortages, of businesses attempting to lure employees away from their current jobs over by offering higher salaries, other perks, and other benefits. I'm curious to know if, considering this environment that we're in right now, and as we've seen just over the last year and a half, this increased focus on movements like Black Lives Matter, if now is the time, really, if you are a Black woman in the workplace, to try to leverage this moment essentially to get better wages, better pay. And for the companies that are out there, what should they be doing right now? Not just for the new hires that they are bringing on board, but for their existing employee base, what they should be doing to really reduce some of those gaps that we do see existing between Black women and their white and their male counterparts.
Sure. Well, to put it plainly, now is certainly the time, right? If not now, then when? And I think to your point about what companies need to do, and I am optimistic about this because we're seeing more effort and focus on this, certainly than I've ever seen. But again, it's about a comprehensive approach. So it's about how you hire, where you hire, right? There's a lot of work being done, certainly at Goldman, many other places, around really focusing on places like HBCUs, which we know are incredibly talented and have the expertise in providing education and just incredible foundations for Black Americans to enter the workforce. Then once you hire them, how do you retain them? What is the support that's given to those employees, right? Again, and I feel like this is a well-worn topic at this point, but it's not just about diversity, it's about diversity and inclusion. How do we make sure that those employees have mentors, have sponsorship? So I really think it's about the full life cycle of it. How do you hire, even before going through the college level, in some fields, for example, that are, there's a lot of focus on STEM education. One of our partners that we work with a lot is Black Girls Code. When we think about getting Black women specifically into some of these, not just higher paying fields, but also growing fields, we realize that some of that awareness has to start in high school. We have to go earlier. So I think it's about starting earlier, being incredibly intentional, bear hugging those employees when they're in your organization, making sure that environment is inclusive, making sure that Black women are paid equitably, right? You have the data, it's simple math, right? We can look at those things, focus on those things. And then another just last piece I'll mention, I think part of it is around transparency and being held accountable. One of the other things we're seeing, across corporate America more and more is companies being willing to talk about, the racial makeup of their workforce, disclose more data around pay. And so I think once we have more information, once we have more transparency, we're also going to be able to not just measure, but of course, make progress.
Definitely. We'll definitely be measuring the progress. Margaret Andadu, thanks so much. And coming up, we'll talk to a fintech founder moving beyond traditional banking services to offer monetary transactions without those high-priced fees. Welcome back to A Time for Change. August is National Black Business Month, and there's been a big push recently to support Black-owned businesses. Black Americans account for 14% of the U.S. population, yet own just 2.2% of businesses.
And CapWay is one of those businesses. It's a fintech company founded by our next guest, and its mission is to educate and serve those long overlooked by traditional banks. CapWay founder Sheena Allen joins us now. And Sheena, it's great to have you here on the show. I know that CapWay was started about 5 years ago. It started out as a debit card option for the unbanked. Tell us how the company and its mission has evolved since then.
Yeah, so the company, I thought of the idea in 2016. Idea came from just going to bigger cities and seeing how they only accepted debit card and credit cards. And then when I would go back home to Mississippi, which is where I'm from, people only carried cash. And so we did about 2 years of research, which got us to late 2018, early 2019, where of course we started building and kind of going to the neobanking space. But the pandemic hit, of course, and we saw the need, of course, expand outside of just, I need access to a bank account. And so as a company, we saw, hey, this is where we need to get into not just offering debit cards. How do we offer education? How do we get into payments? How do we offer things so that people, as they are being pretty much pushed into a cashless economy, what do they need to be financially healthy? How do we put them on not on a sprint, but on a marathon to build generational wealth? And so, yes, it went from how do we be a neobank or offer debit cards to how do we build a financial system for the next generation, for people who have historically been overlooked by the traditional banking system.
Sheena, CapWay operates as a neobank, so with no traditional physical branches, no banking license, no charter. How do you attract new customers, and how do you convince them to trust you with their money?
You know, the biggest thing that for us at CapWay, which is, I would say, not only our biggest competitive advantage, but also honestly has been, I think, what people love about us is we are probably totally opposite from what you will see even from a neobank or the digital banking space, which is fairly still new. Me as a founder, I'm not usually what you see when you walk into like a fintech conference, or when you see like a quote unquote bank owner or a neobank owner. Our education, the way to present ourselves, the information that we're giving, we use things that are way more relatable, things that are more modern. We don't come off as, as we say at CapWay, like your grandmother's, bank account or the way that money was done a long time ago. Times are changing. The way that we look are changing. Gen Z is a total different breed. Millennials, where we are now, even financially, we're just in a total different space. So I think the thing that makes people trust us, the thing that makes people like us, why people even want to give us a try, even though there's multiple options, is we offer something different, not only just from a platform perspective, but from the building, from the perspective, from the culture. We're just very different.
Sheena, I want to talk for a minute about your personal journey. What was it like for you as a Black female entrepreneur? We talk a lot on the show about how just a fraction of the VC funding goes to women-led businesses, let alone women of color. So how were you able to find the seed money for this company? And if you can share with us who some of your investors are.
Yeah, very early. This is my second company. So a lot of my early funding, which people call a family and friends round, but for me, I call it my angel and friends round, came from people that I met in my previous company who invested early. So like Arlen Hamilton, Backstage Capital, for example. But then going into, as we scaled, as we grew, of course, we end up finding people who, for one, believed in what we were doing. Two, it wasn't just saying it for PR. They really wanted to invest and help women of color, people of color. And so some of those investors that we have now, they range from initialized capital SoftBank Opportunity Fund is one of our investors who has been a huge help for us. I mean, they're one of those investors who they're not like micromanaging, but they're calling, what do you need? How can we help? And so we have been lucky to have investors like SoftBank, who once again, is not just for lip service. It's not for PR. They really have invested not just their money, but their time and their resources.
Sheena, you've said that you've seen friends and family members become victims of predatory practices. Could you give us a sense of what happened?
So I grew up in a small town, Terry, Mississippi. And Terry is a place that only had one bank, and it was a local bank that not too many people used. Mississippi actually has the highest population per capita of unbanked and underbanked residents. And that was no different for the people in my community. It was no different for my family and friends. I did have the great grandmother who kept her money at her home. I had the sisters, the uncles who were unbanked. I have driven my grandmother to a check cashing place, to a title loan place. So it wasn't something for me that when I speak about this field, it wasn't that I started CapWay because, I saw an opportunity and like, oh, this is a way to make some money. It was also personal. This was me taking my grandmother to a check cashing place. This was seeing family members, friends who were unbanked and having to rely on predatory services to keep their lights on.
Sheena Allen, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks for joining us today and telling us about your company, CapWay. Coming up next here on Time for Change, singer-actor Jennifer Hudson puts her massive star power behind Black women entrepreneurs. We're going to hear from her after this short break. In honor of National Black Business Month, Jennifer Hudson is continuing to advocate for Black female business owners. The Oscar and Grammy award-winning performer partnered with MasterCard and its Strivers initiative earlier this year to help elevate the visibility of Black female entrepreneurs in the wake of COVID-19. Well, today, MasterCard announced a series of events to celebrate Black female business owners, including a special concert by Hudson at the historic Apollo Theater in New York City. It's the first live performance at that venue since March of 2020. Yahoo Finance's Alexandra Cannell sat down with Jennifer Hudson to discuss the impact of this initiative and why she decided to team up with MasterCard.
It's all about supporting and encouraging Black women business owners, which I think is amazing, and it inspires me. I'm so happy to see the support being put behind Black business women owners, and that is what brought me into this, because it's something I'm passionate about as well.
And you had the chance to virtually meet some of the entrepreneurs featured. Through your conversations with them and just your overall involvement in the program, what do you think are the biggest challenges, the biggest hurdles that are facing Black female business owners today?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm sure there's many, but just the lack of awareness of the businesses and lack of support, which again is why I think this is amazing, to draw attention to it and to let people know how much creativity is out there in the Black communities and how much support is needed for it as well.
And how do you think the Strivers initiative goes that extra mile to really get that done?
By highlighting it, by creating a platform for it and advocating for it and putting a voice out there to let people know that it's there and that it needs support. And it's great things happening, and it's so much creativity out there and passion in these people, in their businesses and in their efforts.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it is interesting too during this time, because there's been a lot of talk of performative allyship in the wake of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement at large, especially among some of these bigger companies, with critics saying, sometimes these initiatives or these change policies, they don't go far enough to really creating the change that is needed. So when it comes to you and when you're choosing these partnerships and these companies to put your name behind, what exactly are you looking for?
Exactly that. I like real things, things that move the needle, things that has substance. And that's why I think this is an amazing partnership, and things that are lasting and making an impact, making a difference. So that is not only specific to one period of time or one group of people, but actually investing in things that are worth being invested in and given the time that it needs, the attention, the support, the love, all of those things. And that's definitely what MasterCard is doing. It's definitely what they're doing.
And you can see the full interview with Jennifer Hudson on our website, including her thoughts on playing icon Aretha Franklin in the upcoming movie Respect. All right, that's going to do it for our show. Time for Change for this week. For Kristin Myers, Sibile Marcellus, I'm Alexis Christoforous.